right, welcome to another episode of Groundwork, where we interview the leaders running the most interesting ecosystem businesses in the world. And today we have Rachel with us. I'm super excited to jump into her experience. I'm your host, Ty Rattigan. And so, Rachel, maybe you could start with telling us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you today about my journey. So let's see, how far back should we go? But I graduated Syracuse University, got an MBA in Israel, and worked in the high-tech world there for 5 years in mobile software startups, primarily in various marketing roles. And then following that, I came back to the US and transitioned into like affiliate marketing. And that was my first foray into partnerships. And from there, I worked for 7 years at LivePerson Enterprise Chat Company, both in referral partnerships and then later in resell partnerships. And then I had a number of stints in more of the world that I'm in now in e-commerce and digital experience. So worked for a year at a company called Maximizer, which is eventually acquired by Oracle. I spent over 5 years at Magento, which was acquired by Adobe, a year at Gorgeous, a Shopify ecosystem live chat and support company. And then today I've been 2 years at Bloomreach leading our channel sales in the Americas.
Amazing. And we're going to have a lot to talk about, so I'm excited to jump in. You wrote an awesome article recently about, becoming like the transition of, becoming partner-led when it pertains to services specifically is an area I want to dig into. You worked at Maximizer, I worked at Optimizely, competitive products in the kind of conversion optimization space where there was a pre-existing ecosystem of agencies that wanted to do that work for their customers, whether it be digital marketing agencies or dedicated conversion rate optimization agencies. There was a lot of experts in the space and like a lot of service opportunities. And so maybe you could just talk us through at a high level first, like, hey, what's the thinking that went into this blog post and some of the key takeaways, and also like maybe some examples from your Maximizer days. Obviously that was a little while ago, and then I will ask you lots more questions about it.
Sure, happy to talk about it. So, I'd start by saying that I have seen the spectrum of partner services. On the one hand, I've seen organizations and been part of organizations that had channel as really an afterthought. And a claim of wanting to go partner first, but really leverage internal services for most of the delivery. And then I've been in organizations like Magento, which was 90 to 95% sourced or influenced by partners. And Magento was a company that almost from its birth as an organization was partner friendly, ecosystem friendly. So I saw what great looks like. And when I got to Bloomreach, I was tasked with helping to take that motion and become from internal services to external services. So by that, I mean leveraging partners to deliver services for and implement our technology. So that's been my journey here at Bloomreach for 2 years. And as part of that journey, I had a lot of lessons learned that is part of that article that you're referring to. So I talked about some of the lessons and kind of best practices around moving to a partner first motion. So happy to dig into some of those points.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to start with, because I think if you talk to any partnerships person, especially anyone that's working with solution partners, they're going to say, hey, yeah, this is a no-brainer, and they're going to be able to give you 10 reasons why it's way better for the company to have partners deliver services than to do them themselves, or like majority at least. And yet most companies end up building big professional services teams and doing it themselves. So I would love to hear from you, just like, I guess at Bloomreach specifically, what were some of the reasons that the executive team were like, hey, we're willing to make this transition? And in general, like, what are some of the key talking points that other solution partnership leaders should be kind of raising with their executive leaders, I guess?
Yeah. I think for us to survive in this market, it's a very heavily competitive market. the leaders in the organization realize that we have to be more competitive. We want to improve our margins, and we want to grow fast. And the way to do that is through partnerships, and the realization that you can't win alone. You have to win with a team, and that team can't just be an internal team. It has to include the ecosystem that is there to both source and influence and impact partnerships. And I think that they were forward thinking and realizing that an investment in that area could could really impact our trajectory, and help us grow more aggressively.
Yeah, interesting. So, and like, if I was to kind of repeat that back to you, so one of the key elements is operational efficiency, which is like, hey, these are people that aren't on our payroll but are doing this services work. Basically the customer is paying for the services rather than the company paying for the services, which is obviously good revenue wise. And then the other thing is, hey, like, this is also a growth opportunity, and the assumption there is that, like, if partners have more services business with you, then they're going to bring more services business to you, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And partners, they'll help you scale. They can hire more quickly. They've got industry expertise that we may not have. They have knowledge of our competitors, so can help us win better in some, highly competitive deals. And then, of course, right, they've got customers that aren't using our solutions that could bring us into new opportunities. So all of what you said is exactly right, and the reasons they invested in this motion.
Awesome. And like, at what level did you have to get buy-in in order for this to become an initiative? Like, because obviously there's a lot of different moving pieces. You kind of have, if you have a professional services team at Bloomreach, I'm sure that they're interested in this. Also, like, customer success. Also, often the product team are like, hey, who are these people that are going to be playing around with our product? The sales team, because they might still want to sell the services. And so there's like a lot of moving pieces. Who on your side, who had to be involved in making this decision, and I guess how high up did it go?
Yeah. So let me answer that in two parts. So first, in terms of how high up did it go, like, I think that was a critical. So you talked about going back to Maximizer. We were hired to build out and sorry, I'm diverting here, but I'll get back to your question, right? So when I said there were organizations I was part of that weren't necessarily partner first, one of them was Maximizer. So they had an internal services organization, and we were hired, myself and another, and my leader at the time, to build out the agency motion there. But it was conflicting because I don't know that there was seriousness in building that out in an effective way, because whenever there was an implementation, it would go straight to our internal services org, right? And so I think when I joined Bloomreach during the interview cycle, that this was really critical for me. And I was told that they want to build out an agency motion, but like, is this real? Is this true? Are you really going to do this? So I found when I talked to the whole leadership team, there was absolute commitment around this motion. I would say that the head of strategy, our CEO, our CRO, all were very committed, and so I saw innately that this was a motion that they weren't just blowing smoke; it was real. Now that said, once I was inside the organization, to your point, wow, like there's all kinds of teams, as you mentioned, that we need to go and enable, and honestly, it's one at a time. I found that, at first the AE team they were naysayers. This just added friction to their deals. Why should they bring us in? So we had to kind of prove to them, hey, like, this will work. This will help you drive to your goals. And once we won over the AE team, next it was the AM team. And it took, proactive consideration of their needs and how to partner with them internally in order to change their perspective on channel. And actually now we're seeing really good momentum with our AM team as well. It's each team at a time, and it should not be lost on anyone that is a huge effort, right? So just as much time is spent on not on external proactive channel sales motion as internal motion around enabling our SC team, our AM team, our AE team, marketing and how to work with partners, right? That's a whole other big investment area. enablement, how to expand to include not just internal enablement for our field team, but also looking at our partners as an extension of our sales organization, um, even finance. So and support. Every part of the organization. Channel can't stand alone on an island. It is supported absolutely by all the different teams of the company.
Amazing. And uh, were there professional services that the sales and account management team were able to sell before making this transition, or were services just kind of like bundled into the overall pricing when they were selling something?
No, it was sold. The implementation is sold, and there's also consulting services we still sell. Initially there was also a compensation piece to that too. So they would get paid off selling those services. So it was bundled in terms of the contract, right? So it was one contract for both software and services together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so then the follow up to that is, how has that changed, or has that changed at all with these new partner services? Like, how are sales and account managers being compensated now that you're making this change?
Yeah. So there's no more compensation for selling services. So we have an even playing field in that regard. And also there's, so the part, and a note on the partner services, or the internal services, they actually support the partner motion. So they're very much hand in hand with channel now. We have a really good relationship together, building out the enablement and the delivery process for a partner. So they're heavily involved with that. But yeah, to answer your question, that was a critical piece on removing the services compensation as part of the sales reps quota attainment.
Interesting. And walk me through, like, because did you talk about, hey, let's just incentivize the sales reps to sell partner services instead, or like more incentivize them more to sell the partner services than our own services, or like what was the
Yeah.
decision to just get rid of the services commissions in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it was realized that, we have to remove that in order to not to make that even playing field. But the reason that I would say that it wasn't that they were comped on partner services, which is what drove them. I will say that we were very lucky at Bloomreach that our CEO created a mandate. And the mandate was that for one of our products, Bloomreach Engagement, that the sales organization had to sell partner services. So that started in 2023. And, we were, I would say, frankly, we weren't even prepared for that on the channel side. All of a sudden, we were like, okay, the sales team didn't know how to sell with partners. They had no idea when to bring in a partner, how to position a partner, how to scope with a partner, how to contract with a partner around like the partner contracting piece.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think though it was challenging. It was challenging for my team. It was challenging for their team. But you learn quickly. So the lesson I have from that is that the mandate is a forcing function. It just makes it happen, because without that, why would you want to add friction to your deal if you're a sales rep?
Sure. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, right? It's like, yeah, partner contracting can like that can slow down a deal or create more questions, or like,
Absolutely.
eat into some of the budget that maybe the customer had in mind for this overall initiative, and those are the
Yeah.
of,
Well, budget stayed the same. So
yeah.
budget is the same, like I would say for the most part,
Mhm.
budget is similar from what it was internally to externally. In fact, I would say externally it's probably a little bit, maybe a little bit more, because there's sometimes more of a buffer, especially for a new partner that doesn't understand how to implement. They're leaving themselves some wiggle room. But for the most part, it's 80% the same as our internal services was.
Yeah, which makes sense. But so then, like, I have a couple of questions on this. So like the one question to start with is like, so you had internal services, and then now partners are delivering those services. But do partners deliver that specific statement of work, or that your team used to deliver, or like can partners basically come in and pitch the work that they want to do on that project, like
Yeah.
their lens on it?
Yeah, great question. What we do is we teach our partners how to deliver the way that we deliver.
Got
And actually, because we have, we still do have internal services, we're actually very protective over client satisfaction. And we want to make sure, in fact, we probably over engineered a lot of this process because we are so protective over and ensuring client satisfaction because we're so used to doing it ourselves. But because we've done it ourselves, we have like really detailed process that we know will ensure client success.
Yeah.
And it was really important for us to teach our partners how to deliver. So we have a process around that I can't go into too much detail about. But we feel very strongly that at the end of this process, the partner will understand and learn. So part of it is a shadowing and split of work model where they can learn from us. But for the delivery itself, the implementation of our products, I think it's pretty much apples to apples. Now there are things that our team never did that we don't touch on the customer side. It was always client responsibility, and so sometimes the client gives that to an agency partner to handle their site and their and the technical work of this project. But now the partner has their own statement of work with the customer directly for anything that's outside of that initial implementation.
Yeah, interesting. And so, how important? Like, you already had that body of work defined, like had gone through all of that learning, so that you could basically like train other companies how to deliver that work. Like,
Yes.
how for people that are listening to this right now and they're trying to figure out like, hey, we want our partners to be able to deliver. We want our partners to like implement and enable people on our product. So that we can drive retention and efficiency and all of the good stuff. Like, how important is it that they have already done the services themselves and have that defined before they bring in a partner to do those services in the future?
I think it's super helpful. If there was another agency doing it before, if it wasn't internal services who would have done it anyway prior to that, but I would say like, yes, like having the documentation, the process, the internal know-how, best practices, all of that is super helpful for getting a partner to get it done right. And so if you can package that up into trainings and also make that training and information consumable in small bits and what we call just-in-time training, but allow the partner consume that information as they need it, is going to set them up for success.
Yeah, amazing. And then it sounds like you have a great service leader who's like aligned to the business need rather than their own personal empire development, which is amazing. Congrats to that person. They're obviously like a high integrity, humility person. So it sounds like congrats to them. I think a lot of the time, basic human nature, people want to they operate in their own best interests rather than in the
Sure.
company's best, whether they know it or not. Like most people behave in a way that aligns with the incentives that are going to benefit their position.
Sure.
And so like most services, people are going to say, hey, like whether they're consciously doing it or not, like I want my team to get bigger, like I want to have a bigger number, like I want to be more important in the organization, like my career development and growth is directly correlated to the amount of services that we sell of my team rather than partners. And so how does someone overcome that challenge? Because that seems like it becomes like one of the most contentious relationships possible in this process.
Well, I think they're having what we talked about earlier, executive top-down requirements makes that process so much easier. That's one. Two, I think that it doesn't necessarily have to impact a services organization negatively, and And it could actually help a services organization become far more strategic, because they're now, instead of powering 100 clients, they're now powering 100 partners who are 100 powering each 100 clients, or it scales. And so they can be in a position of strength because they're imparting all their knowledge to they're creating a little army of themselves, right, out in the world. And I think that at Bloomreach, I wouldn't say it's always been smooth sailing, but I think we've been very fortunate that we have fantastic service leaders who've been very supportive, to your point, around this motion, and really supportive of helping our partners grow. I will say that also, just to shout out to our sales consulting team, because actually in Bloomreach they've been very much a part of that scoping process as well. And they've been supportive of exposing some of our processes to partners. So it hasn't just been sitting with the services org; it also is the sales consulting team too.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And like any tips in general, like because let's talk about like Maximizer or some of the other roles that you've been in where it's like maybe it was a little bit more contentious. Like tips on how to overcome those like potentially combative relationships between partners and internal services orgs. I'll say like we at Optimizely, we worked with agency partners and solutions partners, and it was extremely successful. And then we identified that we had much better retention and expansion when we had partner services in a deal. So much so that we were like, hey, we're going to sell partner services on every deal. And then so much so that we centralized around a particular partner because it was like, hey, we can't, this is like so high priority for us. And then eventually it was like, although it was delivered by one partner, it was basically our own services that was competitive to all of our partners again, and it was like,
right. How funny.
it just turned into the same monster again. If we had all of the operational efficiency, but it was like, we did it. I'm sure it's okay for me to say now, we did it all through Accenture.
Oh, wow.
Much everything through Accenture.
Really interesting to know that now.
Yeah, and so it ended up being like this. We ended up competing with all of our partners in the market still again.
Wow.
And so yeah, it was like we were almost negatively impacted by the success of this motion.
Yeah.
But I'm interested, like, so we were lucky in the same way that you're kind of lucky at Bloomreach, where the company was like on board with it, and they were like, hey, yeah, this is the thing. We can read the tea leaves. But for other roles that you've been in other companies where people haven't been as receptive, like what are some of the tips that you would recommend for people to overcome those challenging relationships?
First of all, the data and the progress speaks for itself sometimes. I think we had really great early wins at Bloomreach to show the impact of channel, and the success, has been great, like in terms of the impact in sourced revenue. And everyone is, at Bloomreach, we're specifically at Bloomreach, we're marching towards a goal of going IPO, right? And so everyone's in that game together, where we want to march in that direction together. So I think they really see the value. In other companies, again, it has been more contentious. One in particular that we haven't talked about much. I know it's an ongoing struggle with the channel team in terms of the company's support for the services organization seems to sometimes wavers between partner getting attention and services getting attention, or the mandate that certain number of that the services organization gets a first dibs at any opportunity that comes down the pipeline, right? I've seen that too. I don't know that I have an easy answer to that question, to be honest. I think just showing partner value in those deals is super important. So sometimes you're competing against your own internal services org for a deal, and you need to kind of show up and be very prepared for that. And the way around that is like, why does this partner have a right to be in this deal? They know this industry better than anyone, right? They've built a consultancy practice around this specific customer pain point that is being felt in this deal. They have 20 customers just like it, right? And really just show up with the partner's credentials that can help you, just like you would compete against other services orgs, compete against your own services org to protect your partner.
Yeah, I love that thinking. And so then, the other thing on this is like, okay, how do we make sure that the partners are doing good work? And you kind of called out already, that's like a really, it sounds like it's almost like, again, a cultural thing at Bloomreach where it's like, hey, you are very passionate about the quality of the customer experience and making
Yeah.
sure that that's all going really well. And so, like, how do you validate that partners are doing the right work and saying the right things, and that the customers are being more successful than they would be with your own services?
Yeah. It's a good question. And we know as partner managers, we manage a team of partners that we don't actually manage, right? So it's really sometimes hard to control quality and ensure that they're doing all the right things. We try. We're by no means 100% successful. We have a lot of challenges sometimes with partners, but we're trying to stay on top of it. So training is important, right? We are, advancing right now, like our training dashboards to ensure that we can have greater visibility on who has started training, who didn't complete it. Can we notify a partner person if they, started the training and didn't finish? We are investing in partner success motion, which is resources that are actually part of the partner services org that are there to support the partner. Probably we need some more investment there, but that role is super helpful for us right now in ensuring the partners can get quick answers to their questions. I think documentation is really important. I'd love to see us invest more in AI and being able to put forth questions that partners have very common in our internal Slack channels, right? Externally, so that they can access it very quickly, or even in our partner portal. So we're looking at all the different enablement paths and channels to get partners up to speed, as quickly as possible and to stay on top of it. But yeah, it's an ever evolving, never ending progress towards success.
Yeah, amazing. So one of the things I wanted to talk about as we kind of shift gears is you spent time working in Israel. Obviously, the Israel tech ecosystem is thriving is an understatement,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, when I was working at GGV Capital, we did a lot of investments in Israel, and then also at Deal, where I used to work, we had a massive team in Israel, and our one of our founders, he's from France, but like spent a lot of time in Israel, and we definitely had that culture. I think so firstly, I would be really interested in hearing what are some of the differences from a partnerships perspective in operating in Israel or with Israeli companies. And the reason why I ask that is because I recently found out, not that recently, but like fairly recently found out that cybersecurity companies generate about 80% of their revenue through partners. And also, many of the best new cybersecurity companies are coming out of Israel,
Right.
right? And so, obviously, if you're in the cybersecurity space, you're going to have a bunch of Israeli partners. Is like I think a fair assumption.
Mm.
But also, that like the founders coming out of Israel must be thinking about that, and anecdotally, like about partnerships, and anecdotally, every single Israeli founder I've ever worked with has just got partnership. They might not call it partnerships.
What do they call it?
They might not want someone else to do it. They might be doing it themselves. But
Okay.
it's been very intuitive that they're like, yeah, of course, there's other people in the ecosystem that we're going to work with to get our product to market or to like get this thing moving faster. It seems like it's a very yes, it comes very naturally in that market. So I'm interested to just hear a little bit about, obviously that we're time traveling a little bit
Yeah.
back now, but like some of your experiences working in that market, and yeah, especially people that are going to be partnering with people from the ecosystem, like what some
That
top
are
tips.
Israeli. Yeah. Well, I wasn't in partnerships then. I was in marketing, but I could talk to you about like some of the cultural things. Funny story is when I came back from Israel, I was in a meeting at the first company I was here when I came back at LivePerson, and the CEO pulled me aside and he's like, we were having a debate about something internally. and I was very like adamant and very strong-willed, and I, expressed my point and didn't really care about the reaction on the other side. I didn't really have high emotional intelligence. And the CEO pulled me aside. He's like, Rachel, can you take it down a notch? And I was so used to an environment in Israel where everything is a debate. And the debate isn't, no one takes offense when you debate somebody. It's really, in fact, half the time they're being a devil's advocate. So they believe the other person, but they are arguing it for the sake of arguing it. And it's all actually for the intent of getting to a better place.
Yeah.
And like finding the holes in the other's story. And so I was so used to an environment that was sometimes people just shouting at each other, but again, no malicious intent at all. It was simply just the way that the office environment was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to be told that. I wasn't aware that I became one of them. But I think to that point, like you'll find that Israelis tend to really want to get to truth and really get to the heart of a challenge, and really are fantastic at solving deep problems, right? It's a very fast-paced environment, used to change, and I would say a culture that doesn't always focus so much necessarily on the planning, but can react quickly to environmental changes, simply because of the history there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the heart of, I think, the tech world. There's so much coming out of Israel in high tech. It's incredible. And excited to see what they're going to bring to the world in terms of AI and the advancements there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can only assume, and this is like just crazy hypothesis, but I can only assume that you have obviously lots of smart people, like, and that's like kind of a benchmark, right? It's like lots of smart people, and then also a lot of people end up in kind of like when they're doing military service, ending up in like cybersecurity type,
Yeah.
intelligence type roles,
Right.
which I think in quite entrepreneurial environments that then prep people for this, like, hey, okay, are you going to start when you come out, like you're kind of already briefed somewhat in this space, like in the cybersecurity space. To an extent, you're almost like it's like an internship in cyber.
It is, and you bring up a good point. It's like you use the word entrepreneurship, but I think that's exactly it. At a very young age, they're put in a position of having to be part of the military and investing themselves in security and risk in risky situations. So they're forced to find answers and find solutions, and that's like the entrepreneurial spirit is very much alive there.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Why do you think, and maybe you don't think, this is just my observation, but like it does seem like, again, here's another example, right? When I was working at Deal, amazing company, absolutely love the team. Our procurement team would, like, all of our vendors that we used for our tools, they would like negotiate partnerships with these companies. It's like, okay, Google, like, we're going to use you for XYZ. Also, you're going to become like a reseller partner for us, and like you can sell our product into your company. Like, we're going to use your product, but you're going to use our product, and that was like
negotiation.
Yeah, and then exactly, but they were forming partnership. The procurement team were forming partnerships. The product team were forming partnerships,
Nice.
across the company. Everyone, it was just like it was in the
DNA.
DNA to just be like building partnerships and like, hey,
Yeah.
rather than like 1 + 1 = 2, it's like equals 5 = 10. It's like, how can we make this thing bigger and more interesting? And like, why do you think that is? Or have you observed that also?
I hadn't considered that before, but I think you're right now that I think about it. Yeah, it's a good observation.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I wish that we could, like, whatever that is, I wish we could take it and replicate it. Like, just like give that to all of the CEOs in the US tech ecosystem. I expect that most founders in the cybersecurity space are like, yeah, we have to partner with IT MSPs, and we have to partner with, we have to get in the AWS marketplace for distribution, and we have to, these things that are like a partner strategy that in the US founders just aren't thinking about. They're thinking about hey, how do we raise enough money so that we can run $2 million worth of ads?
Yeah.
So it's just a.
I think they're forced to scale. They're forced to become really efficient in the way they think about their business. The capital there isn't as abundant as it is here, right? It's a small market, so they have to think big and outside of their where their world, right? They have to, if they're trying to compete in the global market, they've got to think in ways that can help them grow quickly. And I guess partnerships, as we all know, is the way to do that. Maybe they just get that answer faster.
Yeah, I really like that as a thesis. Actually, it's okay, they're operating in a resource scarce environment.
Yeah.
Venture capital. Now there's a lot of venture capital happening in Israel, but it's I think culturally as well. There's an element of hey, how do we do things more efficiently from
Absolutely.
a resource perspective? And so it's if you work through that mindset of hey, yeah, we have a constraint around the amount of resources we have, you almost always end up with partnerships, right? It's we have a constraint on our
shortcut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a shortcut. Exactly. Yeah. It's a shortcut and it's more efficient. And so it makes sense. Whereas the US culture is more operating with there's no constraints. It's everything is possible, which is
until last year. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's suddenly
it all changed, but yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. Okay, well, thanks for workshopping that theory with me a little bit, because I mean, so the hope is that I think for people that are listening to this, hey, it does feel like there's a resource constrained operational efficiency wave coming, right? Where companies are hey, we need to get to a place where we're more profitable, where where we can operate even if we don't take more funding because there's not as much VC funding. And so hopefully people can get their executive team to go through that similar thought process of okay, all roads, if you're thinking efficiency, if you're thinking shortcuts, if you're thinking hey, how do we do more with less, all roads kind of end up leading to partnerships, which I think is a really good one for what you've been talking about with services as well. The last thing I wanted to touch on before we kind of wrap up is you've been through a few really material acquisitions, a couple of times, into interesting companies, or at least seen companies go into interesting companies. And I'm interested, especially Magento and that experience. But I would love to just hear your 2 cents on that ecosystem change, and given that we're going to be in an environment where there's probably going to be more acquisitions that people are going to go through over the next 12, 24 months and beyond, how can people navigate that effectively?
Wow, good question. Yeah, each one was very different. I think, let's see, the Magento acquisition, I think we took about 2 years to get to a place where we were fully integrated. So we operated somewhat independently, even though we were part of Adobe, for about 2 years. And then so the transition happened gradually in some ways. I could say, well, what aspect of it are you interested in most, cultural, or how to navigate that, from if you get acquired, or I think from what I've seen from my experience, not just from my own personal roles, but just in the market, right? Typically there is there's a cost cutting that typically happens after that. And I think it'd be wise for anyone listening to be aware of that, and make sure that you are understanding that probably will happen at some point. So you want to cement your place in the new organization if you want to stay there. to do that effectively, I would suggest looking at the leaders in the new organization that acquires you and building relationships with them. So being proactive, reaching out to them, having them get to know you, showing them your value early on rather than later. Consolidation is typically that it's an acquisition and then a consolidation. So having them be aware of all those things is important. And if not, maybe you want to look elsewhere if you don't see your future in that new org. Not all cultures are the same. Magento had an absolutely different culture than Adobe. For the good and bad, I'd say just be aware of that company's culture, and you might want to ask around folks that are at the acquiring organization. How do you like it? What is the culture like? Also, I think if you come from a smaller organization, you're probably used to wearing a lot more hats. In a bigger organization, you're probably going to be a lot more defined in your role. So just think about what you want to do on your day to day, and how is that going to change in the new organization. I think also, one thing that we saw with Magento and Adobe was the focus on deal size and customer ICP. We were more mid-market, Adobe was more enterprise. So that is a different sales motion in general, right? Mostly they were looking at, selling into much larger organizations. So, do you prefer as a rep to, handle faster deal cycles that are, 30 to 90 days, or do you enjoy the big deals that take a year to close with higher contract value? Some people love that and some people don't, right? Personally, for me, actually, for a long time, I was I very much don't want to wait. I like instant gratification, So I like having short deal cycles that move along fast. It wasn't the case with Adobe, right? And the market they were typically focused on. The channel motion changed quite drastically. Again, we went from, very little services to very, very big services organization at Adobe. In fact, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I think the professional services organization is like $1 billion company, right? It's like one of the biggest agencies in the world. So very much had to be in a place of, competing at times with our own professional services organization. And understanding that motion and how to navigate it became a big thing.
Amazing stuff. So thank you so much, Rachel. Where can people find that blog post that we were talking about that you put together? The kind of I hope that we went into more depth on it in this session, but I think as a key takeaway for people, it would be great for them to go and have a read of that blog post too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on Crossbeam, and you can find it on Crossbeam. The name of the blog post is 10 Lessons for SaaS Orgs Transitioning to Partner Implementations. Or you can find it on my LinkedIn profile, Rachel Fefer, and I think I tagged it there. So
amazing. Yeah, so I would recommend that people go and check that out and connect with and follow Rachel, because she's got some great thoughts on that and other subjects as well. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've learned a lot personally, and I'm looking forward to listening back to this as well as like a learner. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate being on here.